in a sense, Sumantha and Marcus, they are stories about staying true to their principles and beliefs, and they tick off all the rare we have 8 rare touchstones, and they tick them all off, and many more which we haven't accounted for. So before we begin, here's a request to everyone to please keep your microphones on mute and the cameras turned off, please. Do put in your questions in the chat box, and we'll take them as and when we can. So let's begin. We begin with a bit of an introduction by both Marcus and Sumantha. So Marcus, would you like to begin? You're on mute, Marcus, I think. Marcus, you're on mute.
Hold on.
Trying
again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Namaste and welcome, everyone. I'm sitting outside the main lodge at Tiger Mountain. It's an absolutely beautiful day, and it's lovely to see so many people here. I won't go in for a long introduction, but just to sort of give a very brief thumbprint of Tiger Mountain, sort of a sustainable tourism, which we call responsible conservation tourism. We do this because we say we take responsibility for being sustainable with active environmental conservation added. So, we're trying to be very regenerative in the local habitat, the environment, to be its very best. Sustainable.
I think, Marcus, we seem to be losing you.
To be proactive rather than just purely sustainable. Which
there seems to be an internet issue or something,
sometimes has some sort of neutral connotations. How do we come to do this? Well, from our
Marcus, we seem to be losing you every now and then, unfortunately. Sorry. Marcus.
We started from...
We cannot hear properly.
Marcus, we're losing you, Marcus. We can't hear you.
Southern Terai of Nepal, and with mountain travel, Nepal, the trekking company up in the high mountains, and these two are our trip.
Marcus, you're on mute. Okay, we seem to be, maybe till Marcus is back. Sumantha, would you like to begin?
Yeah, sure. So, right, so we are, so the, what I represent is a lodge called Vanghat, which is, which is sort of northeast of Delhi. It's in the state of Uttarakhand. And so we are sort of sandwiched between the Corbett Tiger Reserve, a very, very popular tiger reserve, too popular in fact, and towards and the north of it is it's a buffer forest known as a Kalagar Tiger Reserve. It is not a separate tiger reserve, but for some reason they have a they have a name for it, and it's known as Kalagar. And even though Corbett is a very busy park, but Kalagar is a very it's not a very busy park, so it is slightly remoter than Corbett. So we happen to be towards the north of it. So just to take you to the history of the lodge, it started. We started in our operations in 2000, and I hope I can be heard. I can be heard properly, Shobhana.
Yes, yes, you're clear,
Are you there,
Sumantha.
Shobhana? All right, all right. So yeah, so so we are there, and so we started as so we initially the whole idea of a lodge. In fact, I mean, before that, it came up as a community-based angling initiative. On the Ramganga. Ramganga had issues of I mean things like bombing, if you know what that is. So these are ways of a persecution of a riverine ecology. People, youth, they will go and they will try to sort of they will bomb a stretch of the river to catch fish, and they will there are also other ways like snaring and uh, there's electrocution, there is sort of poisoning, and all that happens. So we started being in a community-based lodge, in the sense that there was a tripartite agreement that we had with the government of Uttarakhand. There was a stretch of the Ramganga River that we started to work on, and it became a fine module of not just employment and conservation, but a partnership with the local communities. And yeah, so that's how we started. So that's the brief introduction of our thing. The other thing that we also did was, it was, I mean, community, along with also, I suppose, ecology, I mean, consciousness in a way. And and so the one experience that we like to focus a lot on at Vanghat is on foot experiences. Even though we are right on the edge of a tiger reserve, but we are surrounded by forest, and much of our operations are actually on foot. So we like to call ourselves a very rare experience. I mean, there are not too many places in tiger landscape where you can explore the forest on foot, and that's what we do. So that is our brief introduction.
Great. Thank you, Sumantha. We've got Marcus back on. Marcus, can you hear us? And if you can unmute the mic. Marcus, are you here? Okay, we seem to have lost Marcus again by the looks of it. So maybe I guess while we wait for Marcus to join in again, maybe Sumantha, we could look at the idea. You've been involved obviously a lot with the community in Vanghat, and my question to you is, I mean, how do you see, what is the synergy you see between conservation and community? And
Yeah, Shobna, actually, I mean, we don't have an option B with that. Conservation, if it has to be successful, it has to be with local communities. And and what also happens is that that it's also, I mean, having said that, it's also a very challenging thing, because if you see really how Uttarakhand's dynamics, it's changing rapidly. We are a landscape which talks about the highest migration for any Himalayan state. So
right.
all that is changing so fast, and the expectations of people, the face of the community, so that's rapidly changing, and that makes it really, really challenging. But nonetheless, yeah, I mean, we have especially when it comes to wildlife conservation, I mean, the local communities is really our, that's something, it has to be ingrained in our entire operation. Yeah.
Right, right. And I mean, you could give the example of, I mean, your Mahasi project, even just your journey from, how you turn that around. It's a fabulous success story. So if you could elaborate on that.
I have a PowerPoint presentation which I just kind of with help of my son, I made it. Do you think we can run that? It might just
Yes.
get a little sort of easy. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Sunil can help us through this bit.
Do you have it? I've got it on my screen.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Right.
So, Sumantha, I have made you the presenter, so you can just start sharing your screen and then just run the presentation. There is an option to
Okay,
share.
so I put the presentation, and I just need some help here. So where do we need to go
On the
from here?
control panel, where you see the mic, there is the webcam, and then below the webcam, there is a option to share your screen. There are 3 buttons. Once you click on that
I
button,
have the entire screen, the application windows, and the Chrome.
no, the control panel of the GoToMeeting
I have this.
control panel, the one
Where the mic and the camera buttons are,
which has
right
the
next to
orange
it, there
arrow,
should
I
be.
guess, in your screen, I think.
All right. So where I am now, it doesn't. It doesn't. I just see bars there with initials.
Mm.
There must be
I'm on the application window.
a button there on the control panel of GoToMeeting,
Not where I.
which
I don't really have a control panel where I am.
no, on
At
your
the bottom of the screen is.
not on your PowerPoint presentation, but on the
So it's like a. Yeah. So when I come on the panel, so I see it's like a keyboard, and a keypad is there in front of me, and that's all that's there. Unless you want me to sort of reboot.
no need to reboot.
Do you see the options? Do you know where your mute and unmute mic button is? It should be right
Yeah,
next
yeah.
to that.
Well, it's not there now. It's so
Oh,
I mean, where I am now, I don't have those two anymore.
okay.
Or in the
And
window where you, I mean, at the top end, you should be seeing a few options under webcams, not under webcams, under where it shows everyone. There's a screen sharing option available.
mm, nope. Okay, all
Well,
right. I've
okay.
got that now.
Oh, you.
So yeah, I see I see it now. Yeah,
Okay, okay, great.
something else had popped up. So I've got the so I'm there now. So you want me to go to the screen option, is it?
Yeah, the screen sharing option.
Okay. No, when I do that, so when I do that, I have got your screen and application window, and it says Chrome tab. That's what comes up.
Maybe we can come back to this a little later if that's okay, Sumantha. So as we
Sure,
only
sure,
have
sure.
about
Absolutely,
an
absolutely.
hour. Uh,
Yep, yep.
so, I mean, as I guess you'll have to just describe the conservation project in that sense till we kind of figure out how to get the presentation up. So, if you could elaborate on the,
Yeah.
Mahasi project.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what. So it was, so because essentially the they had. I mean, I mean, our area does not have big issues of hunting and things like that. It's quite minimal in this landscape. Hence, I mean, perhaps that is one of the reasons why it also boasts of very high, I mean, density of, I mean, tiger. It happens to be a stronghold of elephant. The riverine ecology is very rich. It has and the Ramganga Valley has almost a 200-year-old conservation history. So all that is there. But what was happening that somehow a fish could not be associated with conservation.
Right.
Fish was sort of always, it's as if it is something that's not wild. So the locals who otherwise were not really, sort of damaging to wildlife, but somehow the persecution of fish was very high, and it was a very unsustainable way of persecution. There was, as I was mentioning, there would be, you can make these crude bombs, as we call them. So it's with sulfur and potassium. You put it in a bottle with a wick, light it, put it in the water, it explodes. So it's something that the youth, it's something that's also sort of very exciting for a boy. I mean, we
Yeah.
identified the age group of from 12 to about 22. So that was happening a lot. What happens is, in a rich riverine ecology like ours. So just to share
Mhm.
with you what the Ramganga holds, the Ramganga has over 40 species of fish. The Ramganga has it has about 2 species of crocodilians. It has the gharial and the mugger. The Ramganga has about 50 species of birds of prey. It has numerous species uh, uh, fish eagles, fish owls. So it's a very, uh, very rich river system. So in that, something like sort of bombing happens. It's really quite detrimental to the ecology of the whole to the river, and the fact that this is also the lifeline of this very rich wildlife habitat. So it was very
Mhm.
important to address this issue. And somehow in a tiger dominated landscape, a fish does not have probably much appeal. So it wasn't very easy to get the community roped in and to tell them that, that, I mean, really, I mean, if you really have to save this wildlife and all that, I mean, it is the river that needs to be first protected. So that is how
Mhm.
we sort of began. And
Nice.
we had very meager resources. Let me tell you this: when we started, we were not an organization with deep pockets or something. So
Mhm.
but and also when you so we realized that the local communities need to be sensitized.
Right.
We had noticed that the age group that does it's usually the boys who are doing it. This whole bombing and all that. So the age group of about 12 to about 22. Uh, we started something called Sports for Conservation. Under
Okay.
this banner called Mahasir Sangrakshan. We started doing sporting events in the hills, especially in the winter months. People, the youth of a certain valley or of these group of villages, they will get together, and they do these sporting events, and that's what we sort of roped in. So that sporting event, we sort of diverted that for we for conservation sort of for a message, because if you really understand, people don't want to listen. You can't have a sermon to local communities, you see. It's not,
Mhm. Mhm.
for us conservation would be different, but if you are, I mean, living in a remote part, it is not the same, you know.
Right.
And so that's what. So sports came up in a very, in a very good way, and so it was sports that, so we started to do these sporting events, and that had turned things around. The same lord, the same youth who would be sort of mindless when it came to this conservation, or when it came to not thinking I mean, twice about bombing. I mean, suddenly had sort of stopped doing it, or really it slowed down initially, but then after a while we noticed that the youth had stopped doing it. So that was a very nice, it was a very
That's yeah.
it was a very interesting way to see things. And I think the other advantage was that we were on a ground zero. To be on
Mhm.
the spot is it's very crucial. So that's how the initial journey was. Yeah.
Okay. And therefore, I mean, yeah, obviously you mentioned the benefits. We're deriving the benefits in terms of how this has worked, and the challenges that you face. But in you're also a hotelier. So as a hotelier or a travel business, i- overall, how do you engage the community as far as conservation is concerned?
Right. In terms of as a hotelier, or this sort of this kind of this low carbon footprint type of experience that that we share.
Mhm.
I think it's very important. I mean, there is this whole sort of mainstream hospitality that it is. I mean, it's all based on where you live and what you eat,
Yes.
Things like that. So the typical hospitality thing that's there, But here it was a very different experience we had to share, Vanghat, starting off, I didn't want a road. Now that's
Mm-hmm.
not easy in hospitality, as we know. And
Mm-hmm.
so our guests were walking in almost about 1.5 kilometers, into the
Mm-hmm.
Ramganga Valley. And I called
Mm-hmm.
it my entry experience. It's a beautiful valley where we are. So people were entering, the whole on-foot experience, I think was quite a bit different, and the lodge, the way it is, we were very quite cautious of where we were. I mean, it's a very fragile landscape essentially where we are. It's a very rich wildlife area, and so we also, I mean, did away with things like lighting outside. So when you come to Vanghat, there is no lighting outside. You're pretty much inside the jungle. So these
Mm-hmm.
things initially was a bit of a, I mean, challenge to get the
Right.
mainstream hospitality to accept all that,
Right.
because we were off the sort of I mean comfort zone and into the wilderness zone, as I
Mm-hmm.
like to call it. So initially it wasn't easy, but I think as people came in, that experience was, I think, very overwhelming. I mean that sort of I mean wilderness experience is quite, I mean, rare now when you can live
Yeah.
inside a forest, and all that. So yeah,
Absolutely.
so it did take a while, but I think it's very important at the end of it, because many of our wildlife experiences, the hotels and the and the you know and the um, I mean and the resorts and things like that have worked in a certain manner, and
Mm.
so here it was very different, and we were doing on foot explorations and things like that in a in
Right.
a in a tiger landscape, which in itself, for those of those who have experienced some wildlife, know that what an awesome experience, I mean, that is. So it did, I
Yeah.
mean, take a while, and yeah, and we did not have too many, I mean, takers. We still don't, but we are very happy with this whole dedicated small lot of people. We keep having, and people who like to, who I mean, promoting us. Yeah.
Right. Right. I think Marcus is back. Marcus, are you here?
I am indeed. I've
Yeah.
managed to reconnect. I don't know what went
Oh,
wrong.
that's
I'm sorry.
fabulous. So, I mean, ideally, I would like it to be a question that both of you could answer. So, I know you're coming in a little later, but if you could elaborate on, as a hotelier or as a travel business, what are these principles or measures that we need to adopt to keep, the community involved in the whole conservation process?
That's a good question. I think, if we all accept that tourism should be a force for good. And it can be, but equally it can go the other way, as we've seen, and there's various sort of mixed examples around the world. I think, we have to remember that the local community is the steward of the
Mm-hmm.
natural resources. The business, even when one is local oneself, is still
Right.
somehow outside. You're seen as a sort of bubble. And so allowing the community to remain as the steward of the natural and cultural environment, and also, of course, they're the main beneficiary of any advantages that come from conservation. Whether it's better insect diversity for agricultural pollination, or whether it's better forest resources for forest material use. So I think those two key points have to be at the center of it. I see tourism's role really as principally as a facilitator, to guide, to inform, to help, to encourage. And obviously it has a certain financial impact, as one can employ local people and provide financial advantages and financial support for community-based projects and things.
Right.
But even those projects should be very much not the donor tail wagging the dog. The
Mm-hmm.
community should be the leaders of what they want and why they want it. And the hotel, the travel business, whatever, can be a donor, but shouldn't be driving it. They should be merely the donor, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So I
Right.
think
Right.
those are the key points I have as to why the community and how tourism, community, and conservation can work together. Thanks.
Right. I heard you use a new term for me, active conservation. Earlier you mentioned it, so that is really the need of the hour in a way. Where without the community, there is not going to be conservation.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I do agree.
right.
And
Okay.
I think,
Yeah.
if from my, sorry, yeah,
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
okay. From my experience looking at Nepal over the last 30 something years, and working in Chitwan National Park, the conservation story, and I think this is common in many areas, started with what I call the guns and guards mentality. And that was probably necessary in the establishment of protected areas, getting it off the ground. But Nepal certainly has moved a long way forward from that. And while the army is still there protecting the parks, the park department obviously is doing the environmental and various other management roles. I think there is a vital role for the community. And
Right.
Nepal has sort of done a lot of groundbreaking work in evolving community-based participatory anti-poaching controls, intelligence gathering for wildlife crime, and raising awareness within the community and among the community. And I
Right.
think one of the points for tourism is obviously they can help finance that, and that is a great thing. But tourism can also must raise that awareness with their guests as well. I think that is a very key point
Yeah.
that is sometimes overlooked. And I know, Sumantha, I love the way you walk into Vanghat. We used to do that at Tiger Tops, walking from the lodge to the tented camp. And it was fantastic. You saw rhinos at ground level. You occasionally saw a tiger, leopard. You sometimes had to run away from the odd bear or something. Oh, I've lost you again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, here. We lost him again. Okay. Sumantha, then that sort of
Yep.
brings me to the next point in terms of how do we translate this to the traveler? How would if it's a direct booking that's come through to you or through a travel agent, what are the guidelines for a travel agent, for example?
Well, I sort of feel that, I mean, these are, so I tell you how, I mean, just to take you back, when I came the first time to Corbett, I was a student, I was a child, and we were staying in a place called Tikala, which is today inside the park, and a very sought
Yeah.
after place to be, and we came in. I was in an army school, and and typically, and a very sort of, naughty child. I mean, I couldn't tell a crow from a peacock, so that is how it was. But I remember, there used to be there was a forester there based in Tikala. He was a very keen bird watcher, and
Right.
took us for a walk in the forest. And typically how the question, as a child, or even now when people ask, oh, when we go to the forest, are we going to see a tiger? So he said, well, I will, so he said, fine, I will show you the tiger's forest. And that's how we began. I remember we went hiking, and he would take a leaf, turn it, and show the whole spectrum of insect life under it. It was like a very up close view of nature. And that's what my thing to now, to also to the travel fraternity is that it's time to, just to start to think a little, I think, differently now. It's really important that, we sort of go to these places which are in the middle of nowhere, and then to again, sort of, I mean, I would say, like, it's time to go take a walk in the forest once again. It's
Right.
very important. I mean, that is, and it's especially for our children. Initially we used to not, I mean, just because of, I mean, our location being inside the forest, and the fact that it's on foot thing, and then we have a bamboo raft that takes people across and things. So we thought that, maybe this is not something that, that children, this might be a little child unfriendly. But it started with my own children. When I took my son today, he's 14 now, and on his first birthday, and I remember as a child, how excited it was. And, then I saw other children, I mean, those things which we have taken away from the next generation,
Right.
and the
Yeah.
blue of the river, the fact that you can go into the river, the fact that you can take a walk and, have an up close, you can tell on a sambar dropping from a chital dropping, or, you can tell what a gural is, or a barking deer looks like, just that very, up close with, I mean, nature is very, very crucial. So that's what I would sort of, is the thing that, that this whole, yeah, so it's important to sort of to tell the travel fraternity about this,
Right.
that let's find these real experiences, I mean,
Right.
these are rare, real experiences, and let's kind of, and this is, and the end of it, Shobna, also I think, this whole environmental thing, this whole wildlife business is actually a very
Mhm.
environmental business, it's a very environmental thing that we have to share with our, as Marcus was saying, the,
Mhm.
one of your, one of the ambassadors are the visitors who are going to come in, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
isn't it nice when a very non-initiated person, when they go back, when you have planted that, when you have planted that sapling in them, I mean, that tree in them,
Yeah.
they just go back much
Yeah.
more initiated and things, I think
Right.
that's quite that's a yeah, that's kind of nice. And that's what I would say, the travel thing also now, to we have to start, what is it that we write, BLD, or the breakfast, lunch, and have a dinner experience, or in a forest only the tiger experience, I mean, it's kind of getting a bit overrun,
Right.
it's
Right.
I think it's time to grow up.
Marcus, your thoughts on that? Are we? I think Marcus is right here. We seem to have lost him again. Um, anyway, but yeah, that's extremely important, because I know some of
No,
my
I'm here.
personal experience. Oh, there you are. Great, great, great. So I, the question comes to you, Marcus. How do we pass it on to the, to the travelers and even the agents? How do they pass the message on?
Yeah. Well, in a nutshell, good communications. I think that is the key. And that embraces all sorts of aspects. I love what Sumantha said about going into the forest and picking up a leaf and seeing the insect life underneath.
Right.
It's not just about tigers. It's not
Correct.
just about tigers. We have to look at the whole ecosystem. And part of
Mhm.
that ecosystem are our guests, the tourists. And so are the travel agents and all the intermediaries. So being clear on what you are, as let's say the lodge, whether it's Vanghat or Tiger Mountain, being clear on what you do, being clear on what you are not. And
Mhm.
I think this holds good right the process. So from one's first sort of conversations with an agent or with a guest, the agent's conversations with the guests' arrival at the property and their experience of how they get there, and the explanations that go on as you travel there. All these things must come together as good communications, and then it helps the guest understands what they're buying, and therefore they're not going to go somewhere they don't want to go because they've got a
Yeah.
clear picture.
Right.
I see Praveen's just written, there are very few operators that understand the value of wildlife and nature. Well, then we as hoteliers in the wildlife business have failed, I have to say, and we must redouble our efforts to educate and inform, whether it's agents or guests. And I think that was one of the things I learned so well at Tiger Tops, because there wasn't, have been able to bring here the capacity of our guides, our local staff, all knowing what they're talking about. And if they don't know, saying so, that integrity and transparency is vital at every
Right.
stage as well. So I think those are
Right.
vital.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I think
remember.
that's it.
Yeah, I remember a personal example of one of my visits in Bandhavgarh, and we spent an hour just in rapt attention listening to a naturalist talk about monkey behavior. And it's something that you normally would never look into when you're going into a tiger forest. And we were just enraptured, because it's the communication, as you mentioned, that's the key. And I guess, yeah, that's how we need to move ahead. Make sure that we are translating it right. The stories we're telling out are interesting enough and believable, and need to get out there, in that sense. I will just circle back a bit earlier, Marcus, and I would like you to really give express on why the community really needs to be involved with conservation, and more so, especially at this point in time where we are dealing with a crisis.
So
Marcus?
sorry, I didn't hear that. Shobhana, what was your question?
I said, I'm just circling back to earlier where, I wanted your thoughts on why is it important for the community to be involved with conservation, and if you could, if also more so at this point in history with the crisis that we're facing right now.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think I lost my connection just as I was talking about how protected areas evolve from guns and guards,
right,
and move forward into community-based participatory approaches. And certainly Nepal has done well on that. I think, perhaps at the simplest level, there's always going to be more community than army, or more community than forest department. So by having the community on side, and the community I take as in a loose sense to mean everyone, the resident community, the tourism businesses operating in a natural area or protected area or wherever, they're all part of the community. So having them on side and supportive of the conservation efforts, which goes back to good communications and understanding what those efforts are and why they are, is vital. And if you have that, and you have that community buy-in, then, and particularly if you can go from buy-in to ownership, the results are so much better because everyone is engaged, everyone's pulling in the same direction. And second, of course, in a brutal sense for government, the cost goes down because you don't need so many enforcers, so many policemen of any form. And therefore, community buy-in is a real key. I think there's a challenge. That's the benefit. I think there is a challenge, and I sum it up in one word: time. In order to achieve time, in order to achieve this buy-in, you must give time. People are going to listen. They're going to be suspicious. Traditional communities have very orthodox ways of thinking and behaving. And but you must give that time. You must listen to the community as well as talk. And when you listen, don't just listen to the loudmouths who will always stand up and shout at every meeting, but listen to the women hidden in a corner at the back of the room. Listen to the youth group or the youth leader who's a quieter sort of soul and doesn't want to stand up in front of a big crowd of old elders. They're the people who know. They're the people who have ideas. And if we bring them all on board, listen, within Tiger Mountain, for instance, I spend a lot of time listening to the staff for their ideas of how we can do things. And we actually have what we call our Sustainable Action Group, which meets 2 or 3 times a year and is a staff forum, really to look at what we're doing in terms of sustainability, particularly. But it ranges a bit wider. See what we've been doing, how it's going, see where we can go, seek new ideas, share new information discovered from guests or the internet or wherever. But again, that comes back to good communications. With the good communications, you can achieve these things. You can achieve the community buy-in. Now, today, to bring it to the present and the dreaded virus situation, I think we're already seeing in some areas an increase in poaching as a result of the lockdowns, the reduced human movement, allowing those that are less, less well-intentioned.
Right.
With community buy-in, they've got far less chance. And that's just, I think, a simple answer as to how it is very applicable today. Also, I think the community buy-in helps with messaging. If we've got to get messages across about new ways of doing things as a result of the virus, if the community is on side and listening already and says, yeah, these guys are talking sense, they're supportive of us, they'll listen when we talk about masks or social distancing or whatever it may be. And one of the things I've said very clearly, for instance, at Tiger Mountain, because we're closed at the moment under the government rules, is that we won't reopen unless the community and the staff feel happy to reopen. Because, you know, you could easily see, hey, who are these people from outside? They could be bringing this disease here. So I say, you know, that's all part of sustainable tourism. It's keeping all the players on side and supportive. Thanks.
Right. So this comes to the importance of the welfare of the staff and retaining in them in times like this. Whether, you know, I mean, between Uttarakhand and Nepal, there have been multiple natural disasters, whether there were floods, earthquakes, wildfires, now the disease. I guess once the community is involved and is assured that you know, you guys are looking after them, they will support you in every which way, if I'm right.
Hi, is that for me, Shobhana?
Yeah, it's for both of you. Hi.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry,
I agree with you every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's how the importance of looking after the staff in these times is also a role in sustainability in that sense.
Absolutely,
Conservation
Shobhana,
in that
absolutely.
sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's easy to, you know, these are very, very sort of difficult times, you know, and with no work coming or, you know, or with, you know, with things looking bad, it's very easy to say, well, that's it, you know. And just, I mean, when in the hospitality lobby, when I listen to this, that, oh, how will you pay them? Well, that's, you know, that's our problem, you know. But the fact is, it's just barely been a month or two, you know. If we cannot sustain it for, you know, for at least the half coming year, you know, we are no good. You know, we should stop calling ourselves what we do, you know. I mean, in terms of be it sustainable tourism or be it all that, you know. I mean, you know, this is the time that, you know, all this while they have been with us, you know, this is the time that we need to be with them. So it's very important that, you know, I beg, borrow, or do whatever, but, you know, they have to be taken care of, you know. And you know, also at a time when there are no other options. I mean, you know, I mean, just as simple as that, where will they go? You know, and yeah, and our areas are very, very remote. You know, I mean, come monsoon, and most of our region will not be accessible to, you know, even if the government wants to send food material and all that, it will not be easy. You know, so it's not just, you know, we have to actually plan our entire monsoon. I mean, as I speak, you know, I mean, within a month we'll have to, you know, all our boys, you know, I mean, the entire team that is there will have to, you know, we'll have to ensure that food is there at home, you know, because, you know, also what has happened that at least where we are, the whole agriculture has taken a dip. So people are no longer growing, you know, and also and most of my team comes from the neighboring areas, and the whole, I mean, agriculture pattern has changed here. You can't grow because also of the fact that the wildlife, you know, there is more wildlife than probably, you know, there was in the past, you know. So the whole crop raiding and all that, you know. So yeah, so these are very, very these are difficult times, but we have to be sort of with them, you know. But we have no other option but that. Yeah.
So here's a question from Aditya. You know, do you face problems involving local community or employing from local communities, especially if there seems to be a clash in aspirations of such a community between what needs to be conserved and where they want, what they want to achieve?
Can I answer that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Sure.
please.
Yes. No is the answer, but there are different problems working closely in local communities, I think. I think the first and foremost struggle I have had over the years here at Tiger Mountain is making sure everything stays apolitical, because the only time when difficulties arise is when politics creeps in. And politics tragically, I have to say, is rarely at the best interests of the individuals of the community. It tends to be at the best interests of the politician. And from what I've heard, I think that holds good for both countries. But we, you know, if you avoid that, if you really work with the community, things I've said earlier, taking time to listen, taking time to explain and to re-explain, taking time to adapt ideas to suit what people say, then I think there aren't great problems in the community. I don't think it is a big issue. I don't know, Sumantha, what do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, you have said it. I think, what I also feel is, yes, if you take, when you look at our position, where we are, I'm in a landscape which has, I don't know, we are overrun. The Corbett Park is fine. The Corbett landscape is thriving. What is not, thriving is the mass tourism, or, or what has not, what has led to all that, all the bad news of the fact that, well, we are overrun with hotels and all. That's really in a very small part of a peripheral area of the reserve, but that was enough to get our landscape a bad name. Now when it comes to the aspirations of, as Marcus was saying, was of that. Now this is where I have trouble. Here we are a remote place in the middle of nowhere and a lot of my team are so young are so youngsters. So today in a place where the mobile network isn't there, where just generally those things which we today take for granted are not there. So then it does become a bit of a issue. But I suppose the answer again lies in that thing that sometimes we don't do, is a dialogue. It's very important to sit with the team, with, in our case, also the local communities. Just off late, after the shutdown, we had a lot of these incidents of bombing in our area once again, which had stopped for a lot of, for almost 2 decades now. But now that the population is coming back, and people with, I think, nothing to do is sort of leading to all that. So it's very important that dialogue needs to go on. We cannot have that Sahab attitude anymore. We are all a team.
Yeah.
So I think that dialogue is very, very crucial. We can actually solve many things by that. And yeah. So that's to Marcus has said so most of it, but this is what I thought I should add, because our local communities are very, I still believe that it is, conservation in India is still not a tough call. Believe me, you go to most parts of India or Nepal or Bhutan, there could be poaching issues and all that, but the only thing that often the so-called the law, or the people who the forest department, or or even the hospitality lobby, the hoteliers, we sometimes the dialogue snaps. We kind of we don't get these, we don't put it in our calendar that day we must have a meeting with our EDC members or our village communities, or even our staff. So I think that needs to be happening on a regular basis.
Right, absolutely.
Yep, I very much agree.
Yeah, go ahead, Marcus. Sorry.
Yeah, I very much agree, and I really liked what Sumantha said about paying staff, because certainly we've made a similar commitment that all our staff, even though 1/3 are only on duty, all our staff are on full pay for 6 months. After that time, we will have to think. But I think, I'll give businesses a let out on that point. If you started this year or last year or within the last 2 or 3 years, you may not have those reserves because you haven't operated for long enough to build them up. But for a business that's been going for 10 or 15 years and then announces with a sort of crocodile tears that the hardest thing I had to do in my life as a sustainable business was to lay off 90% of the staff. Well, where are all your reserves that you should have had? You've taken all your dividends and you've popped them in your bank or wherever you've put them. It's time, as I said in a piece in Nepal, it's really time now for shareholders, investors in the travel business or in any business that professes sustainability, to inject capital rather than to extract capital. And I think that's a key point. Sorry, that was just going back a bit onto Sumantha's earlier point. But thank you very much.
But that's a very valid point, what you've made. There have to be reserves, and if we don't take care of the community, how what can we expect from them in terms of them taking care of us in times of like these, you know. If either of you could, you know, just or both of you rather, could give us certain examples of some of the initiatives you have taken at both Vanghat and Tiger Mountain, in terms of how the community have been involved, it would really help.
Far away, Sumantha.
All right. So well, so in when the angling, so when I wish we could have that presentation. I had kind of put some stuff. So that is this was when the whole angling tourism, community-based angling tourism, was mooted. That was the one thing that I had very strongly, that when it comes to this, employment can no longer be an excuse or something. I mean, it was very important that they be sort of partners in the project, and that's exactly how the angling program was. 5% of the turnover of the lodge was going to to the adjoining. I mean, so there were about 18 villages, with
Mhm.
four of us, so-called angling camps. And that is how the mathematics was, that it had to be a profit share module. So this is how it was running till the time the angling program was running. Sadly, the angling program, at least on the Ramganga, had to stop, because you may remember the co-critical tiger habitat sort of mandate that the Supreme Court of India had, in the year 2010 and 2012. The government, or the Supreme Court, had almost banned so-called tiger tourism. you know and so till then, this is how it was. This is how our sharing sort of module was. Yeah.
Right.
You may want to add something to that, Marcus.
Marcus. Marcus. Right. I think we've lost Marcus once more. So here's another question in terms of from Nishant Badmi. The local communities need to have a say in development of various projects, so formal structures would help. But then how would we avoid political intervention, since development does rely on the government too?
Well, see, I mean, the thing is, I mean, these are things that which are going to happen. I mean, if there is political influence and what have you, I mean, that will happen. I mean, as I speak today, the Pradhan of our village is one of my ex guides. He's been on the Kaveri for his angling guide training program. He's a very keen sort of bird watcher. I suppose it is, who in the community, there are people that we have to, support. It's
Right.
just amongst them the right leaders. I mean, because it's a very big issue. What we are trying to address. But I think that's the small role that we can play, at least in the community, just to have the right people to lead, and to support that actually
Mhm.
helps with many issues. I mean, even as I speak, I mean, the same Pradhan, we are talking about, the angling to revive. Even though it can be a very sort of political thing. If you say yes, the other party will say no. You know how it all runs. But I suppose if you have people like that, then it is not really a big issue. And the whole thing is that somehow, I mean, I as a stakeholder, if I am somewhere else and trying to, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that you have to sometimes be on a ground zero. That is very
Right.
important. If you're on the very spot, and if you're interacting with people on, on the ground level, you see that many things fall in place. Once we
Mhm.
sit, I mean, man to man, us, across the table, many things do fall in place. Yeah.
Right. Marcus, would you like to add to that, please?
I agree absolutely. I think at Tiger Mountain, both in terms of the staff and the community, and of course there's a big overlap because over half the staff are from the local village. We've had 87% of the staff here have been from day one, 22 years ago. So we have a very
That's a
low
fantastic,
turnover of
fantastic,
staff, and
really.
that obviously
Yeah.
has allowed us to grow and evolve. Thanks, Sumantha. No, it's allowed us to evolve and grow together slowly. And I sometimes think we tend to rush our fences. And I think particularly in these community-based wildlife lodges, whatever, small lodges, evolution is far better than revolution. And growing slowly, growing steadily, taking it one step at a time is very much key. You know, I'm looking now to work with our community forest user group, which is part of the government system of leasing back government forests to communities, to enhance the conservation management of that forest, which would be probably the best part if two community groups come together, probably the best part of 1,000 acres of forest. If we can get that better managed for conservation as well as for extraction, where, you know, sensible, sustainable use of the forest for human use as well. There's no way I'm saying that shouldn't happen, but that is my big project looking forward. I think with all our engagement and support of the community, my key has been, as I think I said earlier, not to allow the donor tail to wag dog. You know, the community has its own aspirations, and understanding those and saying that we really like that idea, how do you want us to help? And then I think there's a second stage, and education has been probably the key sector for us in Kandanidara, where we are. And it's a case of don't do the job that the government should be doing from their budget anyway, put pressure on the government to do it first. Second, what is the community going to do? And third, then we come in as the hotel and help. And we have had a real success. I think perhaps the point which I'm happiest at is in our local primary school. Even the teachers set aside some of their salary, and rest assured they're not paid very much, to fund meals for the children 1 day a week. So we do, a village youth club, a village mothers group, and the teachers all share the provision of meals for the children, tiffin for the children between us. And I think this is a wonderful community buy-in of all the stakeholders. Because, you know, the government doesn't have unlimited budgets. You know, the government budgets in Nepal are far weaker, obviously, than in India. And therefore, we can support, but the government mustn't take advantage of charitable support or CSR or any other form of support as an excuse not to use the government budgets efficiently. And I think that's very clear. I think that, yes, Shobha's just made a brilliant point that sustainable tourism must reiterate and focus all the time that the beneficiaries are not the hotel or the tourist, but the local community. And I think if that is really there, I think then if you focus like that,
right,
and you're not damaging at the end of the day, whether you call it planet, environment, you are profit or community, culture, conservation, and commerce. The profit thing is that. So to make some more pure capitalist sort of point that it's profit and nothing else matters, and CSR is only done as a bit of advertising and PR. And I think sustainability as a whole, as a tourism operation or any other operation, I think the most important thing that the owners or the directors or whoever must be clear to all the team is this isn't a 6-month marketing gimmick.
right.
This is the core of the DNA of the company, of the business, the community. And we must, therefore, it's something that is, everything is looked at against that mirror or whatever the word is of sustainability.
Absolutely.
And yes, and we've got to be better probably than we have been at getting that message out to all our supporters, stakeholders, travelers, agents, everyone, the entire travel community. I hope that helps.
Absolutely, it's an extremely valid points there. I I really cannot say anything to that because you've really articulated it very well. We've actually crossed over an hour into the session, So in case if anybody has any other question, we'd give it a minute or two. Meanwhile, if I'd really like to thank both of you, Marcus and Sumantha. It's been an absolutely wonderful session. So much to learn, and I feel it's too short a time, 1 hour to. I think we can go on and on. Well, Praveen has just mentioned that Arunachal and Meghalaya in India are having very good examples of sustainable tourism right here in India. Yes, they definitely are putting in some really good practices in place. Well, so to wrap up, I think if both of you could, just give us a minutes summation, it would really help.
All right. So, yeah. Well, so I mean, I suppose, when we, come out of this, I think that's it's very important now to, I think travel and the traveler, I think we were speaking about it earlier today, Shobhana, is, this whole education also, this whole thing has to also go out now. Maybe the whole selling proposition, how we sell our things, maybe that needs to slightly change now. We really have to tell this story of community, the whole story of ecology and how tourism can actually benefit. In some cases when you're supporting so-called, the true sustainable tourism thing, and that's something that's very important. We may not, sometimes, we may not be able to give the same, I don't know how to put it, but worldly comfort as the other fancy one, next to me. But, just these are really true experiences, and the travel fraternity needs to support. Otherwise these are as fragile as the wildlife that they represent. So that's how.
Yeah. Marcus?
I think whether you use the word, I probably, we could use an environmental word. We're an ecosystem, and I think rare is an ecosystem.
That's right.
And I see, people talking about Assam and Meghalaya, yes, and they've done well. But actually, if you look at where the rare properties are located, they're all over India, Nepal, Bhutan. You can range from Ladakh down to the south. You can go through Nepal. You can go over to wonderful Glenburn and places, and then into Bhutan. And we're all sustainable, and we're all different. And yet we all have these underpinning common shared values. And I think as an ecosystem, we must listen to each other. We must listen to our communities where we are, and we must communicate better with them. And most importantly, with the travel industry, so that they're aware of those values, and we must bring them on board so that they become part of that ecosystem. I think that's the key. And so I hope that's what
Absolutely.
we can really reinforce now during this quiet pause time. And I think also as a pause, because India and Nepal are both in the same boat on this one, is actually, should we be relooking at how, what, why tourism is in our countries, and moving sustainability right up to the core, not just a little niche market, oh, those are the nice little sustainable people, but, really putting it at the core of all tourism. I think that's it for me. Thank you very much, and thank you all very much for listening to me rabbit on.
Not at all, Marcus, anytime. All right, just we need to wrap up. We've overshot our time, and thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Sumantha. This has been an absolutely brilliant session. The comments that are coming in also, they're just fabulous. It's really so much of learning, and it's an ongoing process. I mean, for me, the very fact that this needs to be called active conservation, I think that's my real big takeaway. It's just fabulous. That's it. That's a wrap. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining in, and I hope everyone has learned as much as I have today. So, thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Sumantha.
Thank you. Yeah, it was great.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.